Hello, I'm Pam Bailey. I'm co host of Voices Unlocked, a podcast produced by More Than Our Crimes, with the goal of bringing the humanity and the voices inside federal prison out to you so you see the need for prison reform. And this episode today is focusing on parenting from prison. I think one of the most common things I talk about when I communicate with particularly men in prison is about their kids. It's about struggles because maybe they can't get the mother of the child to pick up the phone and put them in touch with the child, or maybe it's a teenager and the teenager is like just not talkative, but there's a lot of angst around how to keep connection with children from prison. In fact, I think the latest statistics out from the federal government is that about 42% of people in federal prison have a minor child. They're mostly fathers, and the average age is 10 years old. So it's a pretty young age to have a parent incarcerated. So joining me today for as co-host is Robert Davis, who got out in 2015 after 21 years and has a very particular contribution to this topic because not only was his father incarcerated, so he understands what it's like, but also had a child himself that he was trying to stay close to. And I'm going to have Robert tell you more of his story.
Thank you so much. Yes, unfortunately, I did have my father incarcerated, and um, I don't know, it kind of like just kept going, I guess, because when I went to prison, of course, now I'm away from my daughter. Uh, I think it started back even before I was born, though, with my father, because my father was in and out, in and out, in and out, and it seems like he came home, and made a child, then went back, came home, made a child, and
Mm-hmm.
so on and so forth. So I really didn't get a chance to see a lot of my father in the beginning because, um, yes, he was always gone, but it started way before my time.
And then, how old was your daughter when you went into prison?
Unfortunately, my daughter was 11 months old when I went to jail, and um, I didn't come home until she was 22
Ah, okay.
and a half. Um, yeah, so that was a long stretch.
And what would you say? What would you identify as the biggest? Well, the barriers to parenting
Mm.
is obvious. It's your way, you're behind bars, etc. But what did you find were the greatest determinants of whether or not you could stay in touch and stay close?
One of the biggest is distance, I think. Distance, I don't know, as much as you can place a call, even now that we have like FaceTime, which we didn't have back when I was in prison, but as much as we have those aids, distance is is sometimes insurmountable, I think. And I think, your kids can just feel that distance. You
Mm.
could call, but they can feel the distance. So I think distance um, is a big deterrent.
And for those of you who don't know, all DC residents who are incarcerated are sent into the federal system since DC does not have its own prison any longer. And that means they're scattered all over the country, unlike people in the state prisons. So a DC resident could be out in California. The co-founder of More Than Our Crimes is in Florida, and that makes it extremely difficult to visit regularly.
It definitely does. I've had the opportunity to be in the state prison because when I first got sentenced, our state prison was open then,
Hmm.
Lorton, Virginia. Um, and then I was there for the transition when, Lorton closed, and then I was sent to Allenwood, Pennsylvania.
Still sort of close.
Sort of close, but it's not 25 minutes down the road. So I think that's when some of the barriers started to really pop up. And then, of course, after Allenwood, Pennsylvania, I was sent to Atwater, California.
Yes, California's the worst, right? It's the furthest away.
And I
Yeah.
spent 8 years there. So to go from probable contact
Hmm.
to sometimes contact to no contact, you really have to be innovative if you want to maintain your relationship, however, or establish it. You
Hmm.
have to
Hmm.
be innovative. You have to. I got help. I went to every parenting class I could find, but just to get ideas, just to, try to get tools that I could use in my conversation, um, learning how to learn more about my kids so that when I do have the opportunity for communication, I could touch on things that would stimulate their mind as opposed to the things that they would kind of sort of forget.
Well, and that is a very good segue to the introduction of the individual I interviewed who's still in prison.
Mhm.
His name is Ron Hill. He's from Minnesota. So his family's in Minnesota, and he's currently in the Hazleton Prison Complex in West Virginia. So
Mhm.
a good distance. And what impressed me about Ron, he has 5 children. And what I figured out right away when talking to him is he really, really cares about his kids. I mean, I'm sure everybody does, but I mean, it came through almost immediately in talking to him. And as you'll hear, he has some very creative ways to that's tailored and customized to each of his kids
Mhm.
to stay in touch. Now, I also recorded an interview with his oldest daughter Haley, who is in Minnesota, and she was born after the first. He's been in and out a little bit too, like your dad,
Mhm.
and she was born after he went into prison. So she was 4 years old before she ever met him. So it was always a bit of a trying to parent from a distance. And what you're going to hear from the first interview with Ron is he'll talk a little bit about that.
Um, well, I've been in prison for 6.5 years now. My oldest daughter was 14 at the time. She's 22 now. My twin daughters, they're 15 now. They were 8 at the time. And my son was 5, and he's 12 now. And then my youngest daughter, she turns 9 years old in a week from now, and she was about almost 2 years old. I last saw her.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Yes.
And my youngest one, my youngest daughter, her name is Berlin. I haven't had any contact with her or seen her or have any means of communicating with her at all. She's the only one that I haven't kind of been able to try to build back a relationship with since I've been in here. So I know I got that work cut out for me when I get out of here. But on the bright side, she will be 9 years old, so there's plenty of time there for me to be involved in her life, at the earlier stages in her life. You know what I mean? My oldest daughter, Haley, she was the one that we had talked about before, where it took me quite a bit of work to even get her back into my life. For the first 3.5 years or so of my prison sentence, she, rightfully so, was upset with me, for being in prison again, and she felt like I was being selfish and made bad decisions that were selfish and chose drugs and the lifestyle over her, and she was correct in assuming that. But I worked really hard at keeping up a one-sided communication or relationship with her, and it paid off in dividends. So we now have a healthy relationship, communicating with each other, and I talk to her all the time.
Okay, so in the next soundbite, you're going to hear from Haley. You've already heard from Ron that when he went into prison this last time that he's finishing up now, um, she just stopped talking to him. He was writing and writing and writing and no response. So we're going to hear from Haley about what was going on with her. What was she thinking about and why was she not responding?
I was was struggling because before he was incarcerated, he was also using at that point. So our relationship was very off and on before he went in. And I just had a lot of anger because I was reaching out towards him a lot and not getting anything back. And then, so when he was incarcerated, I was just frustrated because he was reaching out to me for the first time in a while. And it took me like forever to finally give in and start talking to him again.
Yes, I can definitely understand and also relate to where Haley is coming from. There were times, my daughter's name is Shania, and there were times when, especially around that 13 to 15 age, um, where she was just angry, and she was angry at everything. I'm not there. I didn't call, or, it was everything anger. That was her, go to emotion. So I can definitely relate to Haley being upset that Ron had definitely like let her down by going away again. And yeah, because Shania, a lot of times Shania would not talk to me, and it really did hurt my feelings. I would call, her mom would answer the phone, and it would be like, yeah, she's here, but she doesn't want to talk. Or it would be Shania who would hang up on me, and it would like just crush me on the inside. So yeah, I can definitely relate.
Well, so then I asked Haley what finally got her to start responding to her dad. What's interesting is it's good to know that she was reading his letters. She just is about, I think it was about 2 years, but she told me that when the letters came, she would rip into them. She was anxious, she was
Mm.
eager. She just wasn't responding. So then she explained what finally happened for her to decide I'm going to answer him.
I don't know if there was necessarily like a breakthrough at any point. He never gave up on sending me stuff, and I've told him that was definitely a big reason why I started talking to him again, was that he never gave up on his side. Even if I would go like an entire year without talking to him, he would still send me stuff on my birthday and Christmas and just thinking of you letters. My sister also struggled with drug addiction for a while there, and then being married with her through that and watching her trying to make it with her kids kind of was a little bit eye-opening for me. And then also growing up and having a different perspective on the situation in general, I was like, yeah, maybe I should give my dad a chance at least one more time. And I'm glad that I did.
Okay, Pam, I do believe that Haley did finally mature. I think that uh, the passage of time helped her really make the decision to write her dad back. But just hearing them, I think that it's important that we don't give up. Ron never gave up. Ron kept writing.
Mhm.
And if he had ever stopped, then I think Haley would have just kept going with what was, the norm, then the norm. But and I can definitely remember times when it seemed bleak, when I was frustrating Shania, or she was just standoffish, and I could have gave up, or just washed my hands or waited for her. But I don't think that's the thing. I don't think that's the key. Keep going.
I mean, that's the difference when you're at home with them, and they're big. Because listen, when my kid was that age, and she was like that. She was very non-committal, and I would ask about school. It's fine, and not say anything. But I was there. I could be in front of her face, and
Hmm.
and in prison, as you said, that distance. You just don't have that advantage. Well, the one thing that Ron talks about that turned out to be really effective for him and his kids, all of his kids, is they were all have like an artistic flair. Ron does. He was a tattoo artist before he went in. He's also a talented writer, and his kids inherited his love of art and creativity, and that means the written word as well. So, for instance, one thing that Ron has done is write poetry, and you're going to hear next a poem he wrote for Haley.
Poem is called Father I Am. I wrote it about 2.5 years ago. I was about a year into my sobriety, and I still hadn't had communication with her up to this point on my prison sentence. I was about 3 years into my sentence, 3.5 years into my sentence. The poem is titled Father I Am. I told myself so long ago that unto you I would always be true, that the fatherly love that I would show would fulfill all hopes and dreams for you. To myself I swore a silent oath as I stared into your beautiful eyes, that I would break this cycle for us both of broken homes and grim goodbyes. But amongst my passion and heart so true, I wrestled with my inner demons. The father you deserve best you never knew for so many selfishly addictive reasons. I was supposed to be your protector in your pride. I should have been there through it all. But it seemed like no matter how hard I tried, the heavier my heart, the harder I would fall. Please believe this is not what I wanted, this division which I unfairly fathered. For my dreams are plagued and constantly haunted, and my conscience is considerably bothered. Still remember the blissful days when I was the apple of your eye, but now the reflection upon your gaze is blurred from the tears which I made you cry. I know that you thought that I did not care whether in this life I would win or lose, but if I could do it all over again, I swear you would be the only high that I would ever choose. It truly distresses me to depths unknown to know that I expelled such pain, but the blame is mine and mine alone, and to this I own with such guilt and shame. If ever there were a way to convey and somehow make you understand, then no mere words could express or say just how sorry I truly am. But alas, I cannot change the past and right the wrongs which I have made, but perhaps I may one day prove at last that my love for you will never fade. I love you.
So, and it's not just poetry. Art, as I mentioned, was also very important with the way Ron communicated with his kids. And Haley talks about the fact that art turned out to be that common bond that not only worked with her but her other siblings.
I think he tries to connect to me mostly through art because that's something that him and I share in common. So he'll send me lots of drawings, and it'll be drawings that he's taken hours, days on, very intricate drawings. And he does send me some of the books that he's written for the kids, just to see like what I think about it, if I have any ideas for him. He is very creative.
So for the younger kids, this is actually what initially really caught my attention with Ron. He was talking about this interactive story he did with the younger children, his two twins in particular. And he would start a story and he would mail it to them, and they would add to it or give him ideas for, oh, you should make him do this or make him do that, or let's introduce a dragon for a character, something like that. And so he would take their suggestions and he would do that. And so they had this storybook that they passed back and forth. Now, this does require a cooperative mother to the kids, right? Because she had to facilitate that. But it really, and you're going to see a picture that we're showing you of the cover of the book. And it turned out to be a really effective way of keeping them engaged at a young age, but they're not really conversationalists.
So my sister and I were talking, and I was telling her about how I just felt like there was a lag in communication with me and my children, that I just felt like there wasn't anything fresh to talk about, and it was the same old, just kind of redundant, conversations. And she said, well, try writing them a story, So I was like, okay, that sounds actually like a good idea. So I sat down and I wrote a little first chapter and illustrated it, and sent it to them, and their mom read it to them, and the kids loved it, and it opened up a whole new line of communication between us, where the kids had ideas and suggestions for the stories. And next time I called them on the phone, we were able to talk about it, and it was just a really, really good like rejuvenation of our relationship.
That is such an interesting project that Ron just talked about. This co-writing of a book that he thinks could help other parents in prison and their kids stay in touch. So he's actually working now to develop that into a template for a class, a workshop that could be held in prison for parents to better interact with their kids. Now, obviously, I think depending on the age of the child, like a teenager would need a very different kind of story, you know. But I think it's a great idea.
It's an awesome
And
idea.
he unfortunately, and you'll probably relate to this, he's really bogged down in prison bureaucracy to try to get the class approved, which is a shame, I think, because I hear about people in prison having creative ideas all the time for classes, and they try to get it
Yes.
approved, and it goes nowhere. Um, but my next question for Haley was I was curious about whether or not she played any role with her siblings to encourage them to maybe not make the mistake that she thinks she now did, which was to not be in touch. And this is what Haley says.
I try not to interfere on their relationship with my father too much, just because I know when I was younger, when I was their age, and people were interfering on my relationship with my dad, it really frustrated me because it felt like I wasn't allowed to feel the way I was.
Yeah.
So I am just open for them to message me or call me and talk about how they're feeling, and then just let them know, like, this is how I felt when I was your age, and that's okay to feel that way. But do know that he is trying, and etc.
Oh my gosh. I can remember back to being a kid and um, my older brother going to see my father, but I couldn't go. Um, I just felt like, oh, I wanted to be him so bad. Or coming home from school and finding out that my dad did call, but I missed his call. And like my sister got to talk to him or something like that. So I do think that I can remember back when I wanted to be each and every one of my brothers or sister when it came to my dad's attention. So I can remember when I unfortunately missed it and wanted it so bad. So I guess I can relate to both sides of Haley's outlook.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, I mean, and I guess I'd even compare to a certain extent. I got divorced, and my two children reacted very differently. My youngest daughter didn't talk to me for a while because I was the one that left, and my oldest daughter tried to pressure her. Why don't you talk to mom? Why don't you talk to mom? And it probably depends on how you do it.
Okay.
But my youngest daughter didn't react very well to it. You know, she's like, back off. You know, so it's a fine line, I think, and it's a very delicate subject, but so important. When you think about the role of family ties,
hmm
what would you say about how important is that everybody work together to try to maintain those ties?
Well, I do believe it takes a village, especially when the male is gone.
Mm,
It takes an aunt, a cousin, an uncle. It takes the whole village to help support to get those like strings to come together
mm,
because there's so much pulling them apart. You know, like the biggest thing is distance, but you also have so many other things that you cannot provide for your child. So it takes everyone collectively to try to, I think, to be successful. You know, sometimes it works out otherwise, but the more the merrier.
And you know, I tell you what, one of the most common threads I found to all the stories of all the individuals I've talked to in prison is an absent father. I mean, I don't know. Do you think there's a direct connection?
Well, I don't know about studies, but I just know that I didn't have my dad.
Mm,
And somehow, some way, that real life fact turned out to be the fact that I passed on to my daughter.
So the other player that we haven't talked about when we think about parenting is the other parent, and it's most commonly the mother, because it's, if you look at the statistics, it's mostly fathers, but it's not exclusively. So what's really important, ideally, is to have the cooperation of the other parent. That's not always the case, but it really helps when the other parent wants to facilitate an ongoing relationship. So I asked Haley about the role her mother played, especially during that time period when she wasn't talking to her dad.
I really appreciate how my mom handled it, and she let me do what I thought was the best for me because it was regarding my feelings, not hers. So she allowed me to answer calls when I wanted to, and I didn't have to if I didn't want to. She would encourage me a little bit, like, "Hey, you haven't talked to your dad in a while. Maybe you should talk to him." And if I just said, "No, I don't feel like I want to, I'm not ready," she would just say, "Okay, it's your choice."
Yes, unfortunately, I did spend a very long time in prison, 21 years. As I can recall, in the beginning, especially when it didn't set in that, the 21 years would be that. Uh, my daughter's mother, she helped out a lot. Like she would bring her. So I think she really, she really played a big role in helping me out and establishing the things that I was, trying to get across to my daughter and helping us out as far as um, letting me see her a lot. But unfortunately, things did change. Over the years, people feel different. Um, so yes, I've experienced times when my daughter's mother wasn't cooperative at all, and it's unfortunate that the person who is closest to your child uh, is the one that is not cooperative with you. So it just direct result is nothing gets accomplished.
Yeah, one of the individuals who I correspond with is going through a really agonizing situation right now, and that he sees his son, who's in his teens, starting to follow down his path, and that's the last thing that he wanted. It was the thing he feared all along. But the mother of his son is, not only she has some of her own problems, she's also doing drugs, but also just is not cooperative, and there's so much anger, hurt, and the thing is, she holds all the power.
All the
If
power.
she can choose not to pick up the phone, she
Hmm.
can choose not to answer back, and so he feels totally helpless.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can definitely agree about the helpless feeling, just like riding into the abyss, calling into the abyss, begging into the abyss, because like the abyss has all the power.
I wonder if more could be done before people go into prison. I mean, if you have a child, to like a support program, or letting them know what to expect. I mean, when you think about what what maybe is missing from, as in terms of support, does anything come to mind as something that would have helped?
That's a great idea. If there was some type of services that could be provided to help glue
Mm-hmm.
families back together, that would be great. Especially, if things were established before the parent even left.
That's, yeah,
But that I have yet to be able to see anything
yeah.
like
No,
that.
there isn't that I know of.
Oh my goodness, that
Uh,
would be great though.
yeah. So, as we close out this episode, I asked Ron, knowing what he's learned over this very painful period of time of going in and out of prison, what advice would he give other parents who are maybe beginning this journey, how to keep strong relationships with children?
First of all, I want people to know that just because they're in prison, that doesn't mean that they can't be an active father in their kids' lives. You know, like no matter where somebody is at, they can always still try to be the best father that they can be. And I know that making children's books for your kids and sending it to them, that shows a lot of like effort on the father's behalf to do something like that for their child. And it's a really validating experience to put your own time and effort into creating something and send it to their kids. And it lets the kids know also that even though that their father is absent at home, he doesn't have to be absent in their life, and he can still contribute and find a way to be involved, be creatively involved in their child's life.
And then I asked Haley the same question. What advice would she give other kids?
I would say take your time and do what you think is right when you're ready. But I definitely think that a breakthrough would be talking to your parent that's incarcerated and letting them know how you feel. And they should respond and let you know that it's okay to feel that way. I think a big reason that we may not want to talk to our parents that are incarcerated is that when we feel like we're ready to talk to them and have that breakthrough, you feel guilty for not talking for so long. And then you feel scared that because you're so angry that you're going to just explode on them. So I think that it's important to talk to them and let them know how you're feeling. And if they're like my dad, he was very understanding.
And on that really inspiring note, we're going to end this episode. I hope if you liked it, you encourage friends and family to listen to it and subscribe. Make sure you follow this podcast, whatever platform you're watching it on, so that when we produce other episodes, you'll get notified. Thank you so much.